I'm Rich Hagan. We're here in Renton, Washington, home of Wizards of the Coast. That means Inside R&D Amonkhet starts now.
Okay, so we had this idea of doing a top-down set, of doing a set where we'd figure out the flavor first and then build the mechanics to match. And we looked at all the options, and one of our top options was Egypt. We felt that Egypt would be really cool, it's flavorful, players know a bit about it. But then we decided to go with Japan, and we did Shem's Kamigawa instead.
Amonkhet was a really personal set for me. I don't know if people realize this, but I grew up in Cairo, Egypt, which is obviously a living culture, and modern-day Egypt, which is not ancient Egypt, but it is very much a city that knows its history, and that the history is right there.
The Gatewatch, on the heels of Aether Revolt, are together as a group, deciding to go into the Dragon's Lair, go confront Bolas right now. Gideon is dealing with what that means in terms of a leadership role. Gideon himself is a very charismatic man. He thinks tactically. He's very much about kind of dealing with the situation at hand. And for him, it is go fight this dragon.
Gideon of the Trials has some things you've seen before and some things kind of wacky and new. His first ability helps protect you, just sort of fending off another permanent. His middle ability is something very familiar and iconic for him. He can become a creature and attack directly, unlike very few other planeswalkers have been able to do that. Finally, his third power is a tricky one in that it basically says while you control a Gideon, you can't lose a game and your opponent can't win the game. Calling back to Platinum Angel, where it's sort of fitting. So long as Gideon's there to protect you, you're good. We'll certainly curious to see how this ends up playing out with the Battle for Zendikar Gideon or just other copies of this one himself.
One of my favorite things about Liliana is the fact that she even agreed to go with the Gatewatch. The fact that she's part of the Gatewatch just always makes me smile. She has a sense, we should go confront Nicol Bolas, he's very dangerous. But there's also something else for Liliana here. On Amonkhet is Liliana's third demon, one of the four demons that she negotiated a contract with, and she's here on a mission because she wants to kill all the demons that she negotiated with to get out of this contract. And so, she's here, as a loyal member of the Gatewatch, but she has her own thing going.
Liliana's Death's Majesty was really one of the favorites, I think, internally in R&D. We sort of do an internal poll of favorite cards. This was really at the top. It's just a very clean card in many ways where, it makes a zombie token for her first ability. The second ability lets you effectively zombify a creature, bring back anything from the dead as a zombie. And the third ability ties in very cleanly with that of destroying all other stuff, really, all non-zombie creatures. And certainly zombies are a theme here, showing off mummies, and it fits nicely at home in any decks that are trying to make use of that theme.
Nissa here realizes how kind of sick this whole world is. She has her whole deal is having connections to worlds that she goes to. And Amonkhet has there's almost an infusion of black mana, or just something that is, there's something on Amonkhet called the Curse of Wandering, and it's this idea that when somebody dies here, they don't rest. They get up again as this as essentially a zombie. And while Liliana might think that's pretty cool, for Nissa, there is something that is just not right about this whole plane, and that's going to kind of stick with her throughout this adventure.
Nissa Steward of Elements is our first planeswalker with an X in the mana cost, which is pretty exciting on its own level. So that means that hopefully she's good in a wide range of situations. Certainly if you just play her for 3 mana, you're likely going to want to use her first ability, which is to Scry 2, which then can set up the next ability, which is letting you cheat things into play based on the number of loyalty counters she has. So you can Scry, make sure that the right stuff's on top of your deck, if there's anything there you want, and otherwise you can just start improving your draws, getting the things that you need. Finally, her ultimate gives you just a bit of spectacular endgame where, for example, you might play her in the endgame and just immediately use this ability to send some big lands flying through the air, or alternatively, again, you can just build to that, and that's always a threat where you can do a lot of damage to your opponent if they're not ready.
Story Spotlight number 1 is Renewed Faith, a reprint, which is fun. The Gatewatch heads into this surprisingly nice city of Noctimun, and one of the things they find there are gods. Now, Gideon has experience with gods on his home plane of Theros, with these kind of imperious, destructive, willful gods who don't really care about humanity. But Gideon sees Oketra, the cat-headed god of solidarity, and immediately can tell that she is different. She is walking among the people, she is serving the people and helping them, and he feels this sense of renewed faith in the idea of gods.
As a Magic designer who's been playing the game a very long time, one thing I always think about is what cards could we reprint in this set. Sometimes I want to reprint a card because it has a really cool name that fits the world. Sometimes we want to reprint it because mechanically it makes perfect sense. Renewed Faith happens to be both. It's a really fun card, and the name makes perfect sense and tells the story of how Gideon feels when he arrives on Amonkhet.
Story Spotlight 2, Cruel Reality. So, despite his reverence for the gods here, the Gatewatch are here to find Nicol Bolas and stop him. That is their goal. Gideon decides that the best way to get to the bottom of all this is to join the trials, to become one of these initiates. So with Oketra's help, he joins a crop of initiates, as they're called, because that's not ominous, and goes into the Trial of Ambition, also totally fine, I'm sure. They go into the Trial of Ambition, overseen by the crocodile-headed god Bontu. And at the end of the trial, it is a test of ambition. The initiates are forced to turn on one another and kill one another. Gideon is completely horrified, leaves the trial, leaves the crop, and has to figure out what to do with the cruel reality of this place.
Cruel Reality came from a space of looking all the way back to cards like the Abyss, something that there's just sort of this inevitable every turn. It's this ticking thing that it's hard to work its way out of. In this case, you're paying a little bit more for it, but you're getting the upside where your opponent can't really opt out of this forever. Each turn they're going to be losing a bunch of life if they're not giving up something to the sacrifice effectively. And in this era, we can also tack on planeswalkers to make sure that your opponent might not be playing that many creatures, but if they're not playing creatures, they're likely playing planeswalkers. So that this is really going to be a tax on almost any deck.
Story Spotlight 3, Anointed Procession. So these are these white-aligned serving mummies called the Anointed. As he emerges from the trial, Gideon sees the Anointed carrying away the bodies of the betrayed dead initiates, and his whatever faith he might have had in these gods here is just totally shattered and gone. He groups up with the rest of the Gatewatch. They start to compare what they found out, and they begin to realize part of the sinister truth of Amonkhet, that it seems to be a kind of factory to produce healthy corpses. Fit and healthy corpses. Liliana can't help but admire that a little, but it's still really creepy.
Anointed Procession is a card that obviously works great with Embalm, but I find what goes great with every procession is music, which I like to play on my Panharmonicon, maybe to a parade of servos.
Story Spotlight 4, By Force. The Gatewatch are now realizing that this shiny, happy facade is hiding something really dark. And they saw signs of dissent earlier. They saw a dissenter running through the square shouting that it's all a lie, and they thought maybe we should check up on her. So they find where the dissenters are being held in these creepy stone sarcophagi where their hands are wiggling free. And by this point, they're furious. Gideon's furious. Chandra's furious. They blast them out of these sarcophagi. They get them to safety, and they talk to the woman they saw earlier, whose name is Samut, and they find out all about the dissenters and a little bit more about what's really going on here and how they might be able to stop it.
By Force is a pretty blunt instrument in terms of, hey, we just had Kaladesh block. Let's make sure we have some answers to problematic cards there that, we're giving you effectively kind of a Shatter Storm that you can cast any time in the game. It's tired of dealing with vehicles or whatever else, this is your nice effective way of making sure you get rid of lots of them.
Story Spotlight 5 is Gideon's intervention. So they talk with Samut, this dissenter, and they find out that at the end of the trials, if you get through all of them, if you betray your friends and prove your strength and all of that, the reward at the end is still death. It's being personally killed by Hazaret, the jackal-headed god of zeal. And one of Samut's very close friends, Jeru, is on the cusp of going through the final part of the trials. And Gideon in particular, and the Gatewatch in general, are struggling with this because on the worlds they've gone to, they've tried to help the people fight the things that they're fighting. They've tried to fight the Eldrazi and the Consulate, but these people don't want to be saved. They're not fighting back for the most part. So they go to the trial, and with everyone gathered to see this glorified death, Gideon cannot help himself. He cannot let it happen. He puts his invulnerable body in the way of Hazaret's spear while Samut tackles Jeru out of the way. And just as everyone is looking on in horror at this defiance of the gods, the second sun comes into alignment and things start getting really interesting.